Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is Ancient Egyptian Society, and we're going to talk about 5 terms that, as you read more about this time, it's good to key in on these in order to get a better sense of how diverse and how complex ancient Egyptian society was. So, let's get into it. The first term for us is Egyptology. So, the study and interest, especially in the US and Western Europe, of ancient Egyptian society is fairly old. Some of it comes from the 18th century and the early 19th century. And what you had in especially upper class Europe was this connection between sort of studying classical or ancient Egypt and connections to faith and understanding of the Christian Old Testament. And then you had this otherization of ancient Egyptian society that, as the colonial and then eventually imperial ages occur, only sort of grows and grows, where you have these individuals who, of course, are going out and looking for tombs and sort of all these other things. So the study of Egyptian history is a long-standing discipline within the historical profession, but we need to, as scholars, be cognizant of the manner in which Egyptian society and history has been otherized through the course of time. All right. The second term for us to be cognizant of is the Old Kingdom. So the Old Kingdom is a time period in very early ancient Egypt. So you've got the climate shifts in the Nile Valley. You've got, some early sources that are being gathered. This is a time period in which faith is really central to understanding early Egyptian life. This is a time period in which a number of the gods in sort of this complex polytheism, become sort of more apparent. This is a time period for monarchy. This is a time period of economic success. This is a time period of hieroglyphics being developed. Actually, just before this period, excuse me. And so it's also good for us to know, right, hieroglyphics isn't the only sort of writing form here. Hieroglyphics was a fairly cumbersome writing form for regular Egyptians. This is a time period in which advances are being made in pyramids and sort of work with the afterlife. The early step pyramids by Imhotep are, of course, coming in during this period. A third term for us to be aware of is what's called the Middle Kingdom period. So this is a time period in which agriculture is reforming. This is a time period in which Egyptian society is being restructured. Leaders are focusing. This is a time period of expansion in some ways, right? The Egyptian military is going to grow. They're going to attack and conquer Nubia. They're going to increase their trade to and across the African continent and to the areas around the Mesopotamian world. Eventually, towards the end of this period, you're going to see a decline in aspects of prominence within Egyptian society. Some of this has to do with groups like the Hyksos and others who are, seen as sort of challenging actors to the dominance of Egypt in the ancient world. Another term for us is the New Kingdom, right? Now, another term for that is also something called the Amarna period. And in this particular time period, so you're talking around 1570-ish or so to about 1085 BCE, this is a time period in which the Egyptian military are going to start to adapt a lot from the Hyksos. You're going to start to see the use of bronze weaponry and chariots to their armies. They're going to throw them out of power. They're going to install control. This is the time period in which kings are now pharaohs and spend their time in warfare, trying to increase the size of Egypt and to protect it from future overthrow. It is a time period in which some local projects tend to get, kind of thrown to the wayside. It is a time period for key figures like Hatshepsut and Amenhotep, and this does bring us to our fifth term of King Tutankhamun. Now, Tutankhamun or King Tut was a very interesting figure, and the reason I think it's good for us to mention him as a key figure in sort of Egyptian history is that I think he connects in many ways to some of these misguided understandings that many in the U.S. and others have about ancient Egyptian history. He's significant, right? So he does take the throne at Amarna, but he held the government at Memphis, right, during most of his reign. With of course, Thebes being the religious center. He married his half sister. Both had their names altered to reflect support for Amun-Ra. He dies fairly young. He, he his tomb being sort of discovered or kind of opened up and studied within the context of the time in which it was opened and studied gives us a lot or tells us a lot about kind of how the British thought about the Egyptians, about how a number of these groups thought about the Egyptians, and is one of those where the focus becomes sort of his sort of famous because of the fact that the funerary complex, the tomb, and all of that was preserved. So it's incredibly important. He tells us a lot, but it's important for us to recognize that vis-a-vis the context of things. All right, thank you very much.